Thank you. I'd like to talk to you tonight about digital storytelling and how we can change people's lives, their perceptions, and what they're about. Now, when we talk about this as far as the day of the week, this type of scene is seen over and over again. When you see something like this, it's actually repeated throughout the world. We see people disconnected. Why is that? When I look at the audience, I see people who have stories in this audience. I look at many people who they're storytellers, just waiting to tell their stories. Why can't we tell them? It's because we don't dive deep. And that's an important topic to remember. Dive deep in the stories that we don't bring to life. We're a disconnected society. When you look at this photograph, people are going about their work, they're thinking, but what are they not doing in that photograph? They are not talking. We talk about how we're a very connected society. Students, faculty, staff, people in our community. And we have technology right in our palm of our hand. How many times have you been in a line 3 feet away and someone starts dialing a cell number? It travels thousands of miles up in the sky, comes down to someone else's cell phone. Hey, how you doing? We all do it. When you're in a crowd, you feel uncomfortable. If you don't have a drink in your hand, you have your cell phone. We're very much a disconnected society. What about email? If I look at the audience tonight, how many of you have emailed somebody who is 10 feet from your office? Don't be shy, because everybody has done it. What's amazing is we email for what reasons? Not just to communicate. What we do it to is to prove a point many times. My way is the correct way. Or we document something. Here's a little trick that people don't realize. When we send emails out, after the first 3 lines, what do people typically do? Beep. We're connected, but we're disconnected. When we look at this street corner, this is somewhere in Europe. These people obviously must be in love. They're connected. They're talking to each other. But the world kind of passes them by. This scene is repeated over and over again. This photograph is a subway. It happens to be in Paris. They're coming home late at night. What's going through their minds? They have a bad day. Things that go well at work. A loved one had passed away. What are the stories? We're not communicating. What I have not told you about this photograph, that this was taken a week after the 2005 bombing in London Square, or Russell Square. And the reason I remember that day is that I was a block away from that bombing. I remember it. We don't communicate. These stories that we have are right in front of us. We don't capture them. The stories we have and within us are really a reflection upon ourselves. And as a collection, these stories were a reflection of the world. And what I want you to do right now, I want you to look to the person to your left and to your right. You might be sitting with people you already know, but you really know the person right next to you. In the short time we have together tonight, I want you to find out who that person is, because they have a story waiting to be told. Let me tell you about my story. This is my parents. This is 1947, before they got married. My father was a World War II veteran. This is her mother, came from Sicily at 17 years old. That's quite a journey for a 17-year-old. And we all have these stories stacked away in our boxes in our closet, don't we? We rarely take those out to really talk amongst our family members, our friends, what those stories truly are. This is little Jimmy in 4-H. These are 3-pound tomatoes that my father helped us grow, and we took great pride, great work ethic. Take pride in what you do, Jim. We all have these photographs, and here I am in high school, the geeky guy who knew what his passion was back then. I wanted to tell stories. I may not have been that extroverted at that time, but I knew I wanted to capture these stories and share them with others. And that's an inherent trait we all have, to share stories. And so what is my turning point? Now, many times people will say, when you're in your 40s and your 50s and 60s, you're not going to change. Your life is really pretty much all laid out. But I'm here to tell you can change. So February 26, 2011, I'm at the state capitol in Wisconsin. I had heard there's some things going on with protests. I didn't really know much about it. I wasn't really politically connected. I didn't really know. And my defining moment was on the floor of the rotunda. There's 2 filmmakers, this individual who I did not know in myself. And there were people all over, chanting, screaming, crying. Who was there? Firefighters, police officers, early childhood teachers, right there yelling, crying. It was a very emotional time. I knelt down, filmed, and the sea of humanity was in front of me. And I said, you know what? There is a story that needs to be told. As I look at those group of people on that photograph, there are many stories there. What really struck me is that it's not the masses of people. It's the individual stories that make the difference. As I left the rotunda, there was a woman that came up to me, a young girl. She said, thank you so much for documenting this. I didn't know her. That really kind of hit home to me. I said, well, what is your story? She said, well, I'm a preschool teacher in Wausau, Wisconsin, and I just got my pink slip. That personalized it for me. There was a story to be told. When you see these masses of people, it was interesting. Somebody next to me was an older gentleman. He kind of nudged me and says, yeah, I've been in the 60s in Madison. Some of you may remember those in 1968 during the protests, the Vietnam War. At that time, they had 20 or 30,000 people, and they never had 200,000 people. So I knew there was a story that needed to be documented historically. And so I started writing. I started writing for CNN reports. And my goal was to have 10,000 viewers. That's a pretty lofty goal. 10,000 is a lot of people. But I kept at it. And as of today, we're nearly 1 million. That you have that kind of impact of your stories. Telling stories of other people, you can have that impact. So let me tell you how I got there. I liked politics, so it's kind of interesting, and I got the opportunity to cover the president. That's kind of a nice opportunity, wouldn't you say? Running for a second term. And it's not just the words you use, it's the photographs you capture. Iconic images. This is one not too far from Madison, Wisconsin. Thousands of people were there. Think about the stories that were there. And I wanted to start telling them. So I started, a mile from my house. This is a group of farmers, organic farmers, about up the road from me. And the reason I knew the farm was there is I would run at night, at sunset. And I'd run past this organic farm. I said, gee, what is going on? It was kind of interesting. So I stopped and talked to Jim, the grandfather there. And I said, you know, could you tell me about your organic farm? He said, I sure will, Jim. He has a good first name. Let me give you a tour. When I go in my pickup truck, he took me for a 2-hour tour of his farm. And he was proud of that farm. It just so happened in 2012, we had a drought, you might remember, in the United States. So they were struggling. And I want to know more about them. This is the mother, Lisa. She's the brains of the financial part of the business, the organic farm. I learned quite a bit from her. It isn't just the words I use, it's the photographs I took. And I like to take photographs of people's hands, because they tell a story in themselves. When you look at Jim's, the grandfather's hands, he is suffering from rheumatoid arthritis. It ravages the body. His other hand, he's missing his middle finger from a farming accident. It really told the story, so I wrote about it. It became an international story. It was on CNN International, and this is who I met, Sarah Brown from London. She called me one day and said, you know, Jim, I just love that story. Can you give me the contact information for that farmer? I said, sure, it's the Service family, about a mile from my home. And as I'm talking, I just love English accents. We're talking. I said to her, I was in London in 2005. He says, why were you there? I said, well, my father was there about 70 years earlier. And I took a picture of the same shot where he was at. And it meant a lot to me to be there. And she said, you know, Jim, by any chance, do you have the rest of those photographs? I said, you know what? I do. So I looked in those boxes I told you about earlier. They're hidden away in our closets. And sure enough, here's a photograph my father had taken of Holland's liberation. But what I found most intriguing was the back of the photograph. Because what he did is he wrote the story about what was going on. This is the liberation of Holland and what was happening. One story after another. This is my father in Piccadilly Circus in front of a B-17 flying fortress. And what I found at that time is that he was doing the same thing I was doing today, many years later. He didn't have a computer. All he had was a pen and a photograph or a camera. And that's how he told the story. It became an international story. Thousands of people around the world read it. And people started posting online comments. I remember when my grandfather was on World War II, and this week we're celebrating Veterans Week. There are stories out there right in front of us. We need to tell them. This is a professor right here at our university, Tom Volk. Didn't really know the individual, walking down the hallway, Cowley Hall, and I run into this guy with tattoos, piercing, and blue hair. I thought, gee, there must be a story behind that guy. And there was. Tom, tell me about yourself. Why do you have colored hair? And he said to me, I have colored hair to prove to you that just because I look different doesn't mean I'm not a nice person. Would any of you in this audience have red or blue hair? I don't see too many. One person, where was their hand? We're out there. So I went to his class. I want to know more about this guy. His students absolutely love him. When I went around his classroom, you could see his tattoos. He uses his tattoos as teaching aids. What a great idea. Now, there's one tattoo there that says 2006, May 22nd. And I said, what is that for, Tom? Why a heart transplant? Oh, that's quite a story. That's not the whole story. Because he also had cancer of the lymph nodes, was cured by radiation. The radiation affected his heart, caused the beat kind of waverly, fluttered. So he got a pacemaker in his heart. Oh, and guess what happened? He had a staphy infection on his legs and his feet. I will not show those photographs to you tonight because they're grotesque. He almost died. And then his heart started to fluctuate. He got a phone from Mayo Clinic. You know, Tom, you have to have a heart transplant. That's a pretty serious phone call, isn't it, gentlemen and women in this audience? He got a phone call and says a couple of days later, Tom, we have a heart for you. Can you come in tomorrow? And you know who drove him? His students. Now that's a story. What went on after that is that as time progressed, Tom was able to get his heart back, his old heart. And what do you have his old heart for, you think? So he can teach students what it's like. This is his life journey. So what we did is we wrote a story about it, and also I did a documentary about Tom. And what I found most interesting, and the honor that I have of telling stories, is seeing people's reaction. And after I did the video program, he came into my room. He's a very quiet individual, started to cry a little bit. He stood up, he hugged me, and says, thank you for telling my story. That is the real honor that I have telling stories, and you can share that as well. I want to tell a story about the Franciscan Sisters of Perpetual Adoration in LaCrosse. You may have heard of them. They've been praying nonstop since 1878. And I said, I can't believe this, but it's true. And they said, go up to the retirement home at St. Joseph Ridge, and you can talk to them and meet one of the sisters. Now, I run into this individual. This is Lucy Slinger, who I remember. She was a professor at our university. Now she's Sister Lucy. I said, Lucy, what happened? I decided to become a nun. Oh. And the day I was there was like a little tour of students who were harvesting their organic crops. And the other individual there, a woman, is actually a former student of Lucy. We're all connected. So as I'm talking to the students, we talk, and I took photographs. And one student came up to me and says, Mr. Jorstad, I have something to tell you. I said, what is it? And he said, I used to live in a Grand Prix. I said, wow. There's another story I can't believe. People have different lives we don't realize. The young girl with the squash on the ground, she tapped me on the shoulder and says, hi, Jim. It's Sabrina. By the way, she's the daughter of the organic farmer that I showed you earlier in this presentation. We are all connected. Their stories are right in front of us. So I decided to say, you know, it's easy to take photographs in the day, tell stories in the day. What about at night when these Franciscan sisters are actually praying? So I called and said, you know, Jim, come at midnight. And by the way, don't be late. I thought I'd better be on time because I do not want to break the string of 1878. So I came, opened the door, locked it, and they took me on a tour, and they allowed me in their private chambers. And what was interesting about those private chambers is these nuns come in every hour, sometimes in late evening, because I was there until 2 o'clock in the morning, and they come in their bedclothes, praying every day for that many years. Incredible. And I photograph their hands because to me they're expressive. They tell the story. And as I was talking to them, you know, one of the things that the sisters work on is working with the homeless. So that's a great story. So there was this Reggie I took in Chicago. I took a photograph of him, and I started thinking, you know, Chicago has quite a bit of homeless problem. Do you know there's a big homeless problem in LaCrosse, Wisconsin? So one day I'm walking down the hallway, and one of our coworkers had a bunch of bags of clothes outside her door. I said, why are these clothes out here every day? Well, I work at the homeless shelter. I bring them every Monday. I said, when do you work? 9 p.m. to 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, normally I would not want to be up that late watching sisters pray and watching the homeless because I never knew a homeless person until I went. So I forced myself. This is Greg. All he wants is to play music. He's been homeless almost all his life. And all of a sudden, he's laying in his chair and he says, can I play a song for you? So he takes his guitar out and starts playing Greensleeves, one of the most beautiful renditions I've ever heard. Another person there said, you know, I work third shift at Walmart. During the day, I'm homeless. And it's right down the street from us. So I learned a lot from him. He played the song. It was very moving for me. I learned about him. And it's about people and telling their stories. These stories, again, are right in front of us. We just have to take the initiative and the passion to tell them. This is Sana. This is the last story I'll share with you this evening. I met Sana at an art exhibit. And one of our staff members at LaCrosse here said, you know, hey, Jim, meet Sana. I got to go somewhere else. And I'm talking to this lady. I don't know her at all. And she says, I've been divorced, remarried, and oh, by the way, I have breast cancer. That's not a very good day or a week, is it, to go through that? I said, well, can I tell your story? And we didn't connect for 6 months. But I really wanted to tell that story. So she said, let's do it. She called me. Let's get together. Let's actually talk about it. And here she is. We interviewed her. And she told me more about her story, about the struggles of having breast cancer. And oh, by the way, when she heard she had breast cancer, her son was in jail for a drug problem and was crying for help to go through rehab. That's a bad day. And I also photographed her hands, as I do for many people. And you can see the little Z on the left hand there on her bracelet. That is for her son's first initial of his name. She remembered every day. And when I was done taking photographs of her, she cried for a good part of the interview. And at the end, she said, Jim, I just have to tell you something. I've told you things I've never told anyone else in my entire life. And that's a true honor when you're telling digital stories. Now, coming back to where we started this conversation, this meant a lot to me. And when we look at these stories, I keep on saying these stories are right in front of us. We just have to take the passion and the excitement and the inspiration to actually tell them. Because in this audience tonight, we all have these incredible stories we need to share. Now, when we leave here tonight, 2 things I think will happen. One is, when you leave the room, you're going to take your cell phone, and what are you going to do? You're going to turn it back on and say, did anybody want to get a hold of me? Won't you? I'm going to ask you not to do that. Instead of what I want you to do tonight to leave this audience, I want you to look to the person to your left and to your right again, one more time. Look, I want each of you to do it. The people you don't know, when you leave tonight, I want you to know their name and find out one thing about them. Technology is just one thing, but we need to learn to connect with each other. Carry on. Thank you very much.